Hey guys, Static here with another build video for the Morrowind patch. This is a new variation of my previous PvP build Metastatic, which is a dirty, cancerous, honorless build, and well, the cancer is spread. This is Metastatic 2.0. This is a heavy armor build. You can play in medium armor in this patch, I've done it. You just have to be more careful, but it can work. However, for battlegrounds or solo open world play, you're going to have multiple targets focusing you constantly. And I found out that I end up spending most of my time on defense and line of sighting, just struggling to keep my health up in those outnumbered scenarios. Heavy armor is great. Yes, you're going to lose crit and cost reduction, but with our recovery on this build, both passively and through the use of Dark Deal, I rarely even have sustain problems. The main reason heavy armor is so good in my eyes is not the sustain from Constitution passive. It's never been about that for me, which is why I quickly discarded my Black Rose gear a long time after trying it. It's the max health and the healing received. These two things combined are the reason I find heavy armor attractive and necessary in 1vx situations. Let's start off with our stats here. The first thing you're going to notice is the lack of weapon damage. Don't let this alarm you. I mean, trust me, you're not going to need high weapon damage here. You actually don't even need obscenely high max stamina to do your damage either. This build's not focused on bursting. Although, with the tried and true combination of the couple of the sets that we're running, your burst is going to be more than fine. This build is centered around having 100% uptime on debuffing your opponents, making it extremely hard for them to recover once you've started your assault. It works very, very well. You'll see why when we get to the skills and the gear. Moving on to the recovery, we look very solid here. This is because of the fact that we're a vampire, which is optional. I do like the extra recovery and undeath vampire passives, but it's not necessary. It's also because of this food. Jewels of Misrule is fantastic for a stamina sorcerer in particular. Other classes don't have the instant transfer of one resource to another the way sorcs do. Knowing we don't need max stats to provide our damage allows us to use recovery food. And on your sorcerer, having high recovery in both of your resources means you will have fantastic sustain, even in heavy armor. I'm running the Thief Mundus Stone. You can swap this out for more sustain if you're struggling, but I would say in my experience that it's not needed. The extra damage from a critical attack is great, but as a sorcerer, the real reason I shoot for Thief over any other stone is because crits equal heals for us through the use of our critical surge skill, which I find is very strong and should be used. Our resists are pretty good. When fully buffed, we're looking at a damage reduction of 38% to physical and 36% to spell, with our Ransack providing that 2% bonus physical resist with our minor resolve buff. Crit resists are pretty strong. I do have a few points into CP attributing to this number as the diminishing returns promote spreading points around, but not very many. Our crit resists are around 2k in a no CP environment such as Battlegrounds. One thing I want to mention is that I previously was mistaken in regards to critical resistances and how they behave. I was under the impression that there was a cap similar to physical and spell resists, and at around 3300 crit resists, you would hit the supposed cap and would be around 50% reduction, similar to the around 33,000 cap at 50% reduction of physical and spell resists. This was incorrect information. There is no cap for critical resistances, soft or hard, no diminishing returns, anything of the sort. My rule of thumb had previously always been to try to get to 2k, because if someone in your party was using Transmutation set and it provided you with the 5-piece bonus of extra crit resist to your party, you'd be over 3300, which was around 50% where I assumed the cap was. I just wanted to state on the record that I was incorrect in saying this was a cap, when there is in fact no ceiling for critical resistances. All this being said, I would still recommend the same strategy. 2k is plenty, and when someone hits you with that transmutation buff, 3300 is still fantastic reduction on critical damage taken, and I wouldn't invest heavily into trying to reach past that point. The pots I'm running are the same I've been running for quite some time now. Immovable with movement speed and stamina is a great pot. You can't get much better than that. If you feel like you don't need the movement speed, which shame on you, you do need the movement speed, you could make these pots with Major Savagery instead of the move speed, giving you 10% extra crit rate, which, as I've mentioned before, is really good for Sorcerer. My secondary pots are also immovable with the inclusion of Stealth Detection. These can only be made with Magicka return, which is really a non-issue for a Stam Sorc, as we can convert Magicka to stamina at will. The detection is key here. I hate Nightblades that think they can try and gank me, fail, and just slip away. No, you're not getting away. You've earned yourself a death sentence. Without further ado, let's get into the gear. We're still going to be using the classic Stam Sorc tried and true Viper plus Tremor scale. We're going to be going 5 heavy and 2 medium, full impen on everything here. The reasoning behind this is pretty simple. If you don't want to use a two-hander offensively, as some people find Dizzying Swing a little clunky and easily counterplayed, and if you don't want to go dual wield, which in doing is hard to find enough pressure for a lot of targets out there due to Stam Sorcs not having any class-specific offensive skills whatsoever, then you're left with one option in my eyes. Sword and Board gives you a spammable offensive skill in Ransack, which we don't have in our toolkit as a Stam Sorc. This spammable doesn't inherently have enough burst to be viable on most builds, which is why we have to pair it with the Tremor scale. It's cancerous as hell, it's a dirty way to play, but we have to offset the fact that we don't have any offensive attacks as a Stamina Sorcerer at all, which means relying very heavily on weapon skills. And if you don't like the drawbacks of two-hander or dual wield, this is your option, Viper plus Tremor. I still go full weapon damage and chance on all my jewelry, and I still like to go full tri-stat glyphs all around. As a Stam Sorc, you need that extra magicka to sustain and cast a few of your buffs and abilities, and the extra HP that comes with these is quite useful as well. You should use a disease enchantment on your Sword and Board bar because it provides a 5% healing debuff passively because it's disease damage. This debuff synergizes well with this build. You can then run a poison enchant or even an alchemical poison on your back bar, your choice. You can go with a sword, axe, maul, whatever you want here. I like the maul for easier executes on heavy armor targets, as a two-handed maul will bypass 20% of the armor's target right off the top before even applying your penetration. You can also choose to run Viper on both bars as I am here. I like to have the Viper proc available on the two-hand bar for the extra umph while I'm trying to finish targets off. But you can also use a VMA weapon or anything really just so it's sharpened. Once again, it's your choice. The Viper Maul in Sharpened is not going to be easy to farm. The same goes for the Impen Shield, so keep that in mind when making these decisions. There is a sharpened two-handed sword available named Debaser that can be farmed in one of the Fungal Grotto dungeons. Check out my dungeon guide series here on YouTube to see exactly which boss drops it, as well as the easiest method to farm it. Just as you thought it couldn't get more cancerous, this build is now going to take a disgusting turn. This last set we're running has recently undergone a pretty drastic change, and most everyone has looked at it as becoming a dead set with the release of Morrowind. I disagree. This set is now buffed. Fasala's Guile. This is exactly the replacement for Red Mountain, which was the third set we were using in the original Metastatic build that we have been looking for. Stam Sorc, without using a two-hander offensively, has always struggled with having enough burst on tanky or heal-heavy targets. This set changes everything for us. We no longer need more burst because we're debuffing defenses down to our damage output level. The previous tooltip read that after being hit with a direct damage or ground targeted attack, you reduce the attacker's healing by 50% for 2 seconds. Now obviously that 50% number was overkill, and the fact that it stacked with minor and major defile was pretty crazy. But the problem I always had with this set was once someone realized that you had their healing cut, they would just go on the defensive, 2 seconds later their healing was restored, and now they effectively controlled the fight. You could not keep this buff up on a good player. Not if they knew what you were trying to accomplish. You just couldn't. You could stay right in their face and they would just hit you with dots, shield themselves, or just block until they were back to full health, and then set up a burst on you. You couldn't pressure a player with it unless they weren't paying attention to what was happening to their heals. Now this set bonus has been changed to an AoE minor defile, which is a 15% healing reduction, a significant nerf from 50%, but there are a couple factors here that in my opinion make this change a buff, not a nerf. This is a 5-meter debuff aura around you, about the size of a Templar's shard. In what ways is this a buff? Well, for one, it is going to affect all enemies around you, even if they aren't damaging you. Now this is an offensive set, not defensive, and you're in control of the pressure. As long as you have a gap closer and stay offensive, this will be a 100% uptime on this debuff. They can't turtle up and escape it. There's literally nothing your enemy can do other than run away. That's their only option. Another reason this set spoke to me was because of the changes in CP point effectiveness under Befoul, which increases the severity of healing debuffs placed on your target. This changes the 15% minor defile debuff to a 22% cut to their healing. This is huge. In a CP environment, this build is so nasty that you will actually feel bad when running it. If you're not convinced yet, let's take a look at the last change introduced in Morrowind that puts this setup into the Uber Cancer category. All of our skills are basically unchanged from Metastatic, so please go and check out that video for a full, in-depth explanation as to why I choose each skill and the function of all of them together. There's one skill in this build that I need to discuss at length, as it's the main reason that we're running Fasalas. It's meant to stack Defile debuffs. Reverberating Bash has always been a staple in any Sword and Board Stamsorks toolkit, as once again Stamsorks lack a stamina-based class-specific CC. Notice a trend here? Let's take a minute for a mini rant. Everyone cries that Stamsorks are OP, yet they overlook the fact that we don't possess stamina morphs of so many of our class-specific abilities that we almost lose our identities as a sorcerer. We do not have a stamina spammable, dot, CC, or an execute. The only stam morph we have is our defensive buff, Hurricane, which is great for what it is, but the damage has been nerfed so far into the ground that now it's only considered a defensive buff. It can proc Implosion if your target's under 15% HP, but at that point I feel you're probably already dead due to the fact that I've been execute spamming you from 35% HP or so, once again with a weapon skill execute, as that's all I have access to. I don't even care if our abilities cost Magicka. I have great Magicka sustain, that's fine. But we need these skills to scale off of our highest resource pool, not Magicka and spell damage. Anyways, I'm going off the rails here, but please quit saying Stamsorks have it all, when we use less class-specific skills than pretty much any class out there, and we have as few useful passives as Stamplars who share some of these same issues. Alright, let's get back to Reverb Bash. This is a very strong skill, with the base tooltip providing a 30% reduction to healing. With our CP, this is a monstrous 45% healing reduction on one button. Now let's add all of this up. 45% from Reverb, 22% from Fasala, 5% from our disease enchantment. You've just defiled your target's healing by 72%. That's insane. In a no CP environment like BG's, you're still coming in at a whopping 50% healing reduction. This is more than enough with your pressure through Viper and Tremor scale to really cripple your opponent and force them to stay on full defense, fighting to maintain resources just to heal themselves. In my opinion, the effectiveness on points spent into Befoul in the CP tree is out of control and needs to be toned down. Builds like this are just too powerful because of it. I've watched players in front of me use a major mending powered Vigor into a rally clip and they get a whopping 2 or 3k heal out of it. I mean, that's pretty messed up, right? But wait, there's more. Reverb Bash in all its glory has always been somewhat a difficult ability to fully utilize. Reason being, in order to debuff your target with the Major Defile, it had to be an unblocked attack that successfully landed. Permablock builds, which yes, are still a thing unfortunately, would literally never be affected by your Reverb Bash. Ever. Now, I'm not sure if this is intended because it was not in the patch notes anywhere, so use this while you can, people, but Major Defile provided from Reverb Bash now goes through block. Holy cancer balls, Batman. This is a game changer for Sword and Board users. Not only can you now apply your defiles at 100% success rate, but the change in information given to add-on creators now allows us to use our buff tracking programs to specifically track these debuffs. Once again, in the past, this was not possible. So, now, as long as I'm on my target, Fasalas is going to be applied to them. This green bar shows that this is a 100% uptime as long as I stay on them. When I hit you with Reverb Bash, whether you like it or not, you're now affected with Major Defile, indicated by this red bar. Now you cleanse. Previously, if you or your buddy purged Defile off of you, I had no idea. Now I do. I instantly know that Major Defile has been removed from my screen, letting me know I need to smack you in the face with my shield again. You cannot escape this. I stay on my target, I stay offensive, they go full defensive, they can't heal, they die. Let's look quickly through our CP. I don't want to spend too much time here, as most of the time I, along with a lot of other people, will be spending time PvPing in no CP environments, but I do want to touch on a few things. First of all, let's look at Befoul. This is what makes this build go into Uber Cancer territory. Prior to Morrowind, the points spent here were effective, but now they are more than twice as effective. I don't even need to cap this out at 100 points. Just taking it to 50% is way overkill already and completely uncalled for. This should be changed in my opinion. ZOS has made a lot of great changes in the CP trees. I don't want to bash them, they did a fantastic job addressing sustain issues. Now I feel like sustain is exactly where it needs to be. There are, however, a couple of issues, one being Befoul Strength and the other being Siphoner. This I feel is a joke. It's pretty much like having 100% uptime on slightly less effective cost increased poisons. Resource management is finally in a great spot, minus these cost poisons and this CP star. Cost poisons were introduced to try and wrangle infinite sustain that CP was giving us. Now you have that in check. Get rid of them. Tone down Befoul, and I think you finally have found CP balance. I also want to mention that now CP is only effective to the last full percentage gained. So if you get to a percentage and the next few points don't take you up to the next percentage, take those points out and spend them elsewhere, as they are otherwise doing absolutely nothing. What can I say about this build? People are going to hate you. People hate me. I'm a nice guy and people hate me. I mean, I hate me. This is the most blatant exploitation of bad design I've ever seen. But I'm not going to apologize for it. It's content creators shedding light on builds exactly like this that ZeniMax needs to pay attention to. If you want balance, listen to those of us who are raising the red flags. Defile, too strong. It needs cut in half at the very, very least. Overlooking things like this will never bring balance to the game, as people will always find the exploited setups and use them. They just don't normally make a YouTube video about it. I, on the other hand, want to bring awareness to when something is wrong, and this build, as effective as it is, as much fun as it is, it's wrong. Regardless of whether or not you like the build, if you enjoyed the video, I would really appreciate a like and a subscribe if you haven't already done so. I've been gaining subscribers like crazy lately and have had a lot of positive feedback on my Dungeon Guide series, as well as builds I've been putting out there, and I can't express how happy that makes me. Thanks guys, it really does mean a lot to me. I appreciate it. I'll catch y'all later and see you next time.